Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. I'm excited to have the First Lady of Fundamentalism, the Matriarch of modern polygamy, Anne Wilde. Anne has been an independent fundamentalist for decades and is the second wife of the prolific writer Ogden Kraut. And so she's going to share her experiences, especially probably their most famous book is titled Jesus Was Married. So we'll get into fundamentalist theology. She's an independent fundamentalist, meaning that she wasn't associated with any particular group and was friends with all of them. She even had probably a too close encounter with Ervil LeBaron, the famous murderer. So we'll talk more about that. You won't want to miss this conversation. This is our 2017 conversation with Anne Wilde. And I just want to add, I think she's approaching 90, so probably not going to have her around for much longer, but it's great to talk to Anne, and I'm sure you'll enjoy this conversation. Check it out. Welcome to Gospel Tangents Podcast. I'm here with Anne Wilde. Anne is a fundamentalist Mormon, and I would say is probably one of the biggest experts on polygamy, modern-day polygamy, that I know, at least. Is there anybody else?
It's just because I'm so old. I've been around and experienced a lot of it for many years.
Cool, great. So anyway, this has been funny. I've recently interviewed Brian Hales about his books on Joseph Smith's polygamy. I interviewed a member of the Remnant Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he believes Joseph was a monogamist, and now you. So we're definitely talking a lot about polygamy.
Covering the bases.
Yes,
Okay.
so getting a lot of different perspectives, and so that's kind of what I'm trying to do here. So, what I wanted to start talking about is kind of how, kind of the rift occurred between, I'll call it Utah Mormonism and the Saints in Salt Lake. We kind of know that there was a split back in 1860 with the RLDS Church. And so I'd kind of like to get into when the split occurred, kind of with the more modern, fundamentalist polygamists. So I was wondering if you could kind of give us a little bit of a history on how that started. I know there's been I don't know if disputed is the right term with John Taylor. Is that a good place to start, or should we start before that?
Well, I guess that's probably a good beginning, is 1886, when John Taylor claimed, and I believe, he received the revelation from the Lord regarding polygamy, because at that time it was very controversial. The law was very much involved. They were coming out here and arresting polygamists. And he was approached about signing a manifesto of some sort in 1886 in order to get kind of the government off our back, so to speak. And in the process, he received this revelation. It's only a one-page, relatively short, but it said in there that the Lord would not change an eternal principle or an everlasting covenant. And it said that after he received that, he felt like he could not sign any kind of a compromise. He said he would rather have his arm cut off or his tongue torn out rather than sign any kind of a compromise regarding doing away with plural marriage. So I guess it's kind of started then, but when they issued the manifesto in 1890, that was a key part of the whole history. 1904 was the second manifesto. With Joseph F. Smith, that put a few more teeth in it than doing away with it. And then, of course, in the 1930s, Heber J. Grant issued what we call the Third Manifesto, and that really that was kind of the final straw as far as polygamists were concerned, because if they were found out to be living it, then they were excommunicated from the church. So with each succeeding manifesto, the teeth got a little stronger against us. So in the 1930s, well, it was really sooner than that, you have the Lauren Woolley story where he felt like that he should continue plural marriage. He called a group of 7 men, including himself, that were commissioned to keep plural marriage alive, and which he did. And then gradually, one by one, they began dying off. There was Lauren Woolley, then Joseph Broadbent, who was only president of that council or senior member for about 6 months, then John Y. Barlow, then Joseph Musser. And then there were 3 others after that. But during the period of time of Joseph Musser is when a lot of the men and some of the women for a short time ended up going to jail. They were arrested for plural marriage or cohabitation. So during Joseph Musser's time, they went to prison. There were 15 of them specifically on this one occasion, where they disagreed on whether or not they should sign a compromise or any kind of a document in order to get out of prison to go back to their families. 11 of them ended up signing, and 4 of them did not. And that's a whole another story in itself.
Okay.
But
let's back up a little bit. I want to go back to 1886 because you said that some people were pressuring John Taylor, president of the church at the time,
right.
About issuing a manifesto. So who were some of these people? Were they government officials or elitists?
Oh, I think some of them were leaders of the church. And I couldn't say names without going back through history, but I know that the people were very leery about being arrested and being separated from their families. And so they thought if John Taylor were to sign something, it would help them not have that fear and run the risk of being arrested for having more than one wife. But when he refused to do that, he was, I think, really speaking for the priesthood of the church. But it was also, he's speaking for the church too, because it being president, he spoke for the church. But by not signing anything, that left the people that didn't want to live it kind of high and dry, so to speak, because they were at risk then of being arrested.
Okay, so I've heard that, and I don't know how true this is, so you can tell me if this is a true story or not, but I've heard that some people did not want Wilford Woodruff to be the next prophet because they were concerned that he would sign a manifesto, or a similar one that John Taylor refused. Have you heard that story before?
I really haven't. I don't think when Wilford Woodruff became president of the church, he had in mind that he was going to sign a manifesto. I mean, I hadn't heard that. Let's see, John Taylor died in 1887.
Okay, so this was about a year before his death that he received this revelation?
Yeah, right.
Okay. Do you think he entertained doing a manifesto prior, in 1886, prior to this revelation? Or
he was in hiding he was president of the church for 10 years. 5 of those years, at least, he was in hiding. And it was for plural marriage because he had more than one wife. And he continued taking them, by the way.
Even while he was in hiding?
Yes. Yeah, he did.
Oh.
Let's see, back to her. Oh, I have never heard that Wilford Woodruff was intending to sign a manifesto before he became president of the church. If that's a story you've heard, I'm not aware of it.
Well, it's not that I
because he even prayed about it after he became president as to what course should he take, and he was shown in a dream or told there were 2 courses. He could sign the manifesto, and get the government off their back, or he could the way it was worded is let the Lord fight their battles. Well, naturally, he chose, not naturally, but he did choose what he thought was the best course for the church itself. And so he decided to issue the manifesto so that, it's pretty hard to see a lot of the stalwart members of the church, the priesthood bearers and so forth, end up behind bars where, they were having a tough time financially. I mean, the valley was still, 40 years old or something. They're still trying to make a living and provide for a family, and usually it's 3 or 4 wives. So to have the major breadwinner in jail, that was pretty hard on the family and on the economy of the church. And I can understand that. And a lot of fundamentalist Mormons are very critical of Wilford Woodruff for signing that manifesto. In my personal understanding of it, I feel like he did what he thought was best for the church, but I think he knew that it was a priesthood law and that it could be lived by those that wanted to continue living it as a priesthood law, but they would risk their membership in the church by so doing. So I I'm not as critical of Wilford Woodruff and his signing that as maybe some people are. I feel like, I really feel like he was doing what he thought was best for the members of the church, because by far, most of them didn't want to live it. And so why should you enforce something that the majority of your followers don't even want to live? Common sense say, well, you're trying to do what the majority wants.
That's interesting. So as far as this revelation, I know it seems like in the LDS Church, some people have disputed the authenticity of it. How do we know that that's an authentic revelation?
Well, because there's a copy of it in John Taylor's handwriting. That's the main authenticity I can show. I have a photocopy of that was in his writing. It fits. Another thing, a lot of times history, if it fits, and if it doesn't, you put it on a shelf for a while. To me, the whole historical background of the 1886 revelation fits, because somewhere there needed to be something to instill a desire and be the motivating factor for people to keep on living it. Without that, it would have been, I think, a lot more difficult, confusing. The Lord he'd made his voice very clear on it in section 132 and previously, but I think he needed to reiterate that to give the saints the motivation and the courage to continue with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's in his handwriting. When I don't believe that revelation is public, or is it?
Anybody can find it by looking it up. I don't know if it's online. I would imagine it is online. Okay. I have a copy of it right here.
Okay, I might have to get a copy of that.
But
I'll have to post that with the interview.
Yeah. It's very much available. It's been printed in books. I was one of Ogden Kraut's wives, and it's been in some of his books, some of Brian Hale's books, an actual copy of it. So There's all kinds of evidence for it.
Okay. I just talked with Kurt Bench as well.
Right.
You used to work, or I guess you still kind of work with me a little bit. You're part-time emeritus, I guess, right?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
So, in fact, I just saw you at one of the signings for the Mountain Meadows Massacre. Uh-huh. So that's where we were in this interview. So, the thought, especially with Kurt Bench, comes on my mind was, this a Hoffman forgery? So how long has that been known about publicly? I would assume it dates well before Mark Hoffman.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Ogden started writing books in 1969, and we knew about it then. I think anybody that really wanted to find it could find it. And fundamentalist Mormons, since a lot of their history goes back to that important revelation, they knew about it.
Okay, so is that in LDS Church archives, or where is?
I'm sure it's up there somewhere. Okay. It might not be real easy to obtain because the church doesn't like to come out and make a big deal of it. But fundamentalist Mormons make a big deal of it.
Okay. So let's move on to kind of, I guess, Post-Manifesto Polygamy. There are some critics of the church, of the LDS Church, that say, well, the reason why Wilford Woodruff did that was he wanted the statehood and he wanted to get the government off their backs, but he was still secretly practicing polygamy. And it seems like there were some polygamist marriages. I know the judge, when that came out, said, well, he was going to take it for what it said, and it seemed like the LDS Church was stopping polygamy, at least publicly. It does seem like it did move underground. Do you have any comments on whether you think that 1890 manifesto was that meant for public consumption, but privately we were still going to practice that, or how does that work?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what was in the back of Wilford Woodruff's mind. I don't know, other than the fact that he took, as far as we know, there's pretty good evidence that he took a plural wife 7 years after the manifesto himself. We also have very good evidence that many of the apostles, the Quorum of the 12, took additional wives after 1890. That's one reason why the 1904 manifesto had to come out, is to put teeth in it, because so many people were very quietly taking additional wives, especially in Canada and Mexico. and they were being sent down there by some leaders of the church with a coded message to whoever, like Anthony W. Ibans or whoever was in Mexico or Canada that was designated to perform plural marriages outside the United States. They had this note authorizing them that it was okay with the leaders that they perform this plural marriage to the couple that presented the note. So, yeah, very definitely there were many plural marriages after 1890. One of the best things that's ever been written on that period of time is Michael Quinn's Post-Manifesto Polygamy. It was in the 1985 Dialogue magazine, about 95 pages. It's absolutely amazing because he's so meticulous about footnotes. And so he had all this references and sources on all these people that took plural wives that were leaders of the church after 1890.
Do we have any idea how many leaders of the church did take plural wives between 1890 and 1904?
Well, leaders of the church, that could include stake presidents and bishops, but among the quorum of the 12, I think it was about half took additional wives.
Okay.
But I'd have to research that to be sure.
Yeah. So would you say that Wilford Woodruff didn't really mean the manifesto if he was still taking plural wives?
He did it for the church.
He did it?
It was a press release, really.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was. And when Orson Pratt announced it in the fall conference of 1890, it was something that when they issued the press release in late September, the government officials, U.S. government officials, wouldn't accept it because it hadn't been voted on by the church. So the next conference, which was early October, they presented it as something for the people to vote on. And I'll never forget the quote, B.H. Roberts was sitting on the stand, and when he called the vote, he said, "It was the awfulest day of my life. I could not raise my hand. I could not vote for it, for the manifesto."
Oh, really?
So, there are experiences like that different people had. Some of them were so happy they cheered. Others had tears in their eyes. A lot of them had questions. What do I do with my wives then? But it was a very tough time. So I'm not going to judge Wilford Woodruff or anybody. I just would like to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
That it was a test, really, for those who really wanted to live it. There was still a way to live it, but you couldn't do it with the consent of the church anymore. Okay.
Well, you could.
Well, you could, but after 1904, you couldn't.
Okay, so let's talk about 1904. What were the events going on in the church that led to the Second Manifesto?
Well, the very fact that a lot of the people had been taking additional wives. And Joseph F. Smith, himself had several wives. I think he just realized that the pressure was coming again from the government. You aren't meaning what you said. We understand there's still being marriages performed. He felt like something had to be done to reinstate or reinforce that decision of 1890. So he issued the Second Manifesto. And I believe that one said that it was not, it should be discontinued in Mexico and Canada as well as the United States. I'd have to double check on that, but I think that's when it was extended to include outside the United States.
So the 1890 manifesto was inside the United States?
Well, it didn't say that, but that's the way it was interpreted.
Okay.
See, he was speaking for the church to the U.S. government. So people understood it. Oh, well, then that applies only to the United States. He didn't say that in the manifesto, but they interpreted it as being that. So that's why they thought, well, we can still do it out of the country. We're not doing anything wrong.
So is it true that some people went to Mexico to obtain a plural sealing?
A plural
wife or a plural...
Well, a lot of them took their prospective plural wife and went down to Mexico or Canada because there was somebody down there designated to perform plural marriages.
Now, I've heard that Mitt Romney has some...
Miles Romney, I think it was a great-grandfather.
Okay.
Grandfather or great-grandfather.
And
so he's a descendant of Miles Romney, who lived in Mexico and had plural wives.
Okay, so Miles Romney, did he actually live in Mexico? Or
Okay. As far as I understand.
So wasn't that he just went down there to get married and came back, or?
I'm not sure. I think he was living down there, but sometimes people would go down there just to get away from the government, and they take their plural family with them. There's those kind of situations. So I'm not sure if he just was down there living because he had more than one wife and he wanted to live it peacefully. I think that's kind of the case. I read his biography, but it's been a while, so I can't remember for sure.
Okay. So that's interesting. So it seems to me that there was also another big issue in the early 1900s that may have led to the Second Manifesto, and that was the Reed-Smoot hearings.
Oh, right, in 1904.
Yeah, can you talk about that?
Well, what particularly? I mean, there's 4 big volumes about the Reed-Smoot hearings. So,
as I understand it,
they didn't want to seat him because he didn't have more than one wife.
Well, from what I understand, he had been elected a senator from Utah.
Yeah.
Was that in 1900?
1904.
Oh, it was 1904.
Well, I think that's when the hearing was, 1904. Yeah. And I'm not sure when he was elected, shortly before that.
Okay, because it seems like it was a while. And as I recall, the history that I remember is that the Senate did not want to seat Senator Smoot, or an Apostle Smoot, even though he was a monogamist,
right?
Because there was concern that the Mormons were still doing polygamous marriages in the temples against the 1890 Manifesto.
That's my understanding.
Okay, yeah. And so that's probably what led the government to apply a little bit more pressure.
That was one of the reasons, I'm sure.
And led Joseph F. Smith to issue the Second Manifesto.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so that's kind of what led to that. So now, even with the 1904 Manifesto, well, as I recall, wasn't there an apostle or two that was excommunicated for?
Yes, there were 2 of them, John W. Taylor and Matthias Cowley. And the term has been used, they were kind of scapegoats. The church felt like they had to do something to show the government they were serious about discontinuing it. So Matthias Cowley was disfellowshipped, and John W. Taylor was excommunicated. Matthias Cowley was eventually reinstated.
To the quorum or to the church?
Just to the church. I don't think he was put back in the quorum. So. But anyway, both of them were polygamists, and I just feel like the other members of the quorum decided that something had to be done to show the government they were serious.
Okay, so they were more scapegoats. Now, as I understand it, and this probably gets into where you and Brian Hales disagree a little bit. So as I understand it, John W. was John's
son. Mm-hmm.
John Taylor, back in 1886 or so, was concerned that the church may one day get rid of polygamy, and so he ordained a small subset of
the council that I mentioned before, of 7 men that were commissioned to keep plural marriage alive.
Okay, so and these 7 men were supposed to keep it alive even outside of the church if necessary. Is that?
Well, I don't know if it made that specifically clear. Even if it was outside the church, they were just commissioned to keep it alive, to see that not a year passed that a child was not born in plural marriage. At that time, they didn't, I don't think, anticipate a manifesto in 1890. They probably thought that the church was eventually going to have to compromise in some way because the pressure was getting so strong from the government. So this was an avenue that they could do it separate from the church. And like I mentioned before, as a priesthood law. The thing is, with plural marriage, it was a priesthood law to begin with. When Joseph Smith reinstituted it as a doctrine that came from the Old Testament originally, it was not a law of the church. He lived it secretly for many years. He appointed others to live it. It was not a law of the church until 1852, when they came out here to the Valley and Brigham Young, brought it up. So it was a law of the priesthood, then it became a law of the church in 1852 until 1890, And then it was no longer a law of the church, but it was still a law of the priesthood. It was never not a law of the priesthood.
Oh, no, that's interesting.
That's how it's continued.
So is it true that fundamentalists, polygamist Mormons, believes that essentially now we're living not we, because I'm not a polygamist, but the fundamentalist polygamists are living kind of in the same mode that from, I don't know where you date the beginnings of polygamy, up to 1852?
Well, it's similar. Yeah, but I guess regarding whether it's a law of the church or the law of the priesthood, that part's similar.
Okay. So, yeah, I know, in fact, we just had a discussion about this, online discussion. I know Brian Hales brought up the point that, well, if you're not part of the church, we don't recognize that priesthood.
I know that's the stand of the church today.
Right.
If you are not a member of the LDS church, you do not have that priesthood. I disagree with that because the priesthood existed before the church was organized. I mean, they got the Aaronic priesthood before 1830. So it can and has existed separate from the LDS church. The only way that a man can lose priesthood is not, I don't think, through excommunication from the church, unless it was from sin. That's the way a man can lose a priesthood. If he has had it conferred correctly to begin with, and he has not done anything that the Lord would not honor, then he can still hold the priesthood outside the church. The church is a vehicle through which the priesthood can function. But if the church is taking another course than the eternal principles that the priesthood is supposed to uphold, then which path do you take? That's the decision we've had to make. Are we going to abide by the eternal, unchangeable principles of the gospel and the priesthood, or are we going to go along with the church who has changed literally every doctrine and ordinance of the gospel in some way? So that's the choice.
Okay, so I guess that brings up another question then. Do you consider the current LDS church in apostasy?
Well, the DNC says, and I will set the house of God in order, but it has to be out of order before it can be in order, set in order. So yes, I think to some, and people will disagree on to what level it needs to be set in order, but yes, I think the time will come. Even the Lord said, I will send one mighty and strong to set in order the inheritance of the saints and set in order the kingdom of the house of God. House meaning kingdom. So, and the church is part of the kingdom. So, yes, I do believe that things will reach a point where things have to be set in order.
Okay. So, as I understand it, you were actually a member of the LDS church for a number of years.
Many years. I was born and raised in it. I was not I'm not going to say the date that I was excommunicated, but I was excommunicated because I had been a plural wife.
Okay.
Less.
So, and I know I've heard another interview with you, and you said that many fundamentalist Mormons believe that the church is, even if it's in apostasy, it's still a good thing.
Oh, absolutely.
And it does contain a lot of the important ordinances of the gospel. Is that true?
Well, they've been changed to some degree, but it's still got a lot of good things about it. I'm glad that I was raised in it. I went to BYU. I loved going to school there. I still love the church. It does a lot of good. I even go once in a while because I have friends there. And I just, this is the way the Lord wants it. It's been all the way through history. This is what's happened. The Lord restores the gospel. It lasts like in the time of the Nephites for 200 years nearly, and then the people start making changes and fall away. It's nothing that hasn't been done in the history before. So it doesn't really get me all riled up where I can't sleep at night because of the changes that have been made. I feel like this is the way it's supposed to be. This is a test for people who really want to continue with these eternal principles. Plural marriage is just one of them. And then when things are set in order, then the Lord will know which ones he can depend on to keep those principles alive.
Okay. So I believe, and I don't know, you tell me if I'm wrong here, that fundamentalists generally do like that that LDS members go through the temple and they complete those ordinances. They recognize those ordinances and those priesthood. Is that true?
No.
Well, that's not true.
Well, there's a lot of fundamentalists that question whether or not the church still has priesthood authority. And I don't know if we want to go into that, but for various reasons. So I don't think there are many fundamentalists that think that the temple work that's being done today is authentic or of any validity. And in fact, this isn't my my personal belief, but some of the fundamentalist groups have temples of their own where they do their own endowment work because they feel like they have the priesthood, and so it is of more efficacy than what the church is doing. I think that's why we have 1,000 years of the millennium, is to straighten all this out. So I'm not going to say that the temple work that's being done today is authentic or not. That's up to the Lord to decide on that. Temple work should be done with correct priesthood, and that's debatable.
Okay. All right, so let's jump back. We started going through the history, and we'll jump back to there again. So we talked about up to 1890, then 1890, 1904, and then this period from 1904 to 1930-ish.
33 or I think 1933, about that.
So after the 1904 manifesto was really the first time that a person could get excommunicated for practicing polygamy.
Yeah.
And I guess there were probably a lot of polygamists, so they didn't excommunicate everybody immediately, but they said if you contracted a new marriage, that was...
Yeah, but some of them did it in quiet still. I mean, let me just say that I know of cases, without naming anybody, that took new wives that were still members of the church in the last 20 years, but they were very quiet about it.
So church leaders didn't know about it.
Yeah. But when and to be consistent, if they do find out that they will hold a court and they will be excommunicated, which is it should be. That's right in the handbook.
Okay. So you're saying that this is still happening today. There are LDS members who are joining polygamy and still maintaining membership in the church.
Not a whole bunch of them.
Publicly.
Yeah, certainly not publicly.
Right.
And not in great numbers. But there are isolated cases where that may be true.
Okay. So let's talk about this period, because you were talking about 1904 to 1933 and Joseph Musser. So what was happening in that period between 1904 and 1933 and Joseph Musser?
You mean in the church, or because there weren't any groups up until later on?
Okay.
Really, well, it's kind of like when the sun goes down. When does it get dark? It's just gradually. So the term fundamentalism wasn't even used until probably in the 1950s. Marky Peterson and Joseph Musser both used that term about the same time. So it was just not a real distinction of, here's a polygamous group over here and they believe in polygamy and the church doesn't. It was just kind of, they both went kind of parallel together, with some people still continuing it and the church gradually giving it up. So when Joseph Musser became the senior member of the quorum, this priesthood quorum, they called it.
Okay, is this quorum of 7?
Yeah. Well, now there was a quorum of 5 in 1886, and then 2 more were added. And then when Lauren
Is that
Willis...
what it's called, is the quorum of...
Well, I don't...
Priesthood?
Some people call it the Council of Friends, or the Priesthood Council. It's known by different names, depending on who's telling you the story. But when the last one was alive, Lauren Woolley, he was the last of that initial council that John Taylor called, then he was the last one, and he felt like he needed to, and I think he was told, to call some other men to keep that principle alive. So he called another council.
Was he? So he was one of the original 5, and the other 4 had died? Or
Oh, well, yeah, you had George Q. Cannon and Wilkins and, I can't remember. It's been a while, but there were at least 5. And then Joseph F. Smith was called when he got back from his mission in the Sandwich Islands in Hawaii as part of that council to keep, but this was all below the radar. So anyway, when they began dying off, then Lorne Woolley was the last one of that original council. And so he called.
had they called people in to replace the ones who had already died? Or
No, they just
were down to one.
Yeah, down to one.
Okay.
Way I understand it.
Okay.
And so he called these other men I told you, Broadbent, Barlow, Musser, LeGrand Woolley, Charles Zitting, and Lewis Kelch. But a little at a time, not all at once.
Right.
Some of them were all at once, and then some of them were called a little later. So anyway, when Joseph Musser was the senior member, because the other 3 before him had passed away, then that's when the split happened. And it's too complicated to go into, but suffices to say that there were 2 members that they wanted to add to the quorum, and Joseph Musser was not in favor of that, and he called Rulon Allred, Owen Allred, and some others to another council. So now there's 2 councils. Yeah. And each one claims that they're the only ones that have the authority or the true priesthood or whatever you want to call it. And so that's when the division began. Joseph Musser died in 1954, so this happened before that. They went to prison. And when he came out, he was not feeling well. And anyway, there's a whole lot of story behind that.
So 1933, why is that a pivotal year?
Well, because that's when Heber J. Grant really put teeth on the issue, that Third Manifesto. So then, then there was a real division then, a real separation, because there were some people that definitely felt like they ought to continue with that. They felt like it was an eternal principle, and in 1886, God says, I can't abrogate or do away with a true principle. If it's true now, it's an eternal true principle, and I can't take it back. So anyway, using that and other things as a basis, they went on living it separate from the church.
Okay, so Musser, up until 1933, was he a member of the LDS Church?
As far as I know, I'm not sure when he was actually excommunicated.
Okay.
There's a journal about him, and there's a lot of books. Brian would probably know the year. I can't remember offhand. I do know he died in 1954.
Okay, so up until about 1933, were there...
It was just
you said there were originally some apostles that were part of this Council of 5 or Council of...
Yeah, George Q. Cannon and Joseph F. Smith.
Okay, so Joseph F. Smith. So he's the one who issued these...
Yeah, it's ironic, isn't it? But the pressure was so strong from the government, and it's kind of like Wilford Woodruff. There was a lot of pressure, not only from the government, but from people inside the church. They didn't want to live it. They didn't think the church should live it. It was giving them a bad name. You go on and on. So there was the majority of the people in 1890 didn't want to live it. They were glad when the manifesto came around. And I think similar in 1904, when Joseph F. Smith felt pressure to give another manifesto.
So in 1933, we got the Third Manifesto, and that's when the church was like, we mean business. Okay.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that Heber J. Grant had 3 wives, and he made the statement that he's going to keep on living until somebody gave him a son, which never happened. But, there's a lot of stuff like that, saying one thing publicly and another thing privately. And you can understand that. It was the same way in Joseph Smith's time. He'd say one thing publicly and do another thing privately, because not only was the world not ready for what he was teaching, but a lot of the converts from England, polygamy wasn't a popular thing with most of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he had to keep it kind of quiet and talk to those men only whom he knew were loyal to him and would accept it.
So the idea is in 1933, you could not contract any new wives. You could keep living with the ones that you already had.
Well, I even think at that time it was recommended you keep your youngest wife. The one you can have children with. It was recommended. I don't think it was a hard and fast law, but I think it was, and you could still recognize them as a wife, but you could not sleep with them. So that's why it was recommended you keep your youngest wife and have children with her.
Okay. So 1933, it sounds like there was a split among the polygamists. So you got the Allred Group and then the Musser Group?
Well, no, I don't. It wasn't the Musser Group at that. Well, Joseph Musser called Rule and Allred, which became the Allred Group.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, eventually the senior member was Leroy Johnson and Marion Hammond. Those are the two that were added that Joseph Musser didn't go along with. So they started forming their own council.
Okay, so the Allred Group, if I'm correct, they're known as the AUB, the
Apostolic United Brethren.
Uh-huh. So they're. Could you talk about the AUB group, or what are some of their characteristics? I think most people are familiar with FLDS, but not as many people with AUB.
Well, the AUB has a council, a priesthood council. The number varies from time to time. They have a senior member of that priesthood council. He's called the president of the priesthood in that group. They do not have the strict appointment and control over marriages that FLDS does by any means. There's a lot more free agency. There's more than one member that has the keys of sealing, the head of the group, and then others that he designates can also perform marriage sealings. Their headquarters are in Bluffdale, but they have communities in Montana, Mexico, central Utah, so little communities around. They have a membership of about 7,500. And they have a lot of the same traditions as the LDS Church. They have a relief society and priesthood meetings and things like that.
Okay. Now, you talked about a council. That wouldn't be like a council of 12 apostles or anything like that?
Well, like I say, the number of the council varies.
Okay. Would they be analogous to a quorum of 12?
Kind of. Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't necessarily happen.
As far as I know, they don't have a president and two counselors. Now, maybe they do. I'm not a member of that group, so I can't tell you a lot of the details, what goes on.
Okay.
I have friends in the group, but we don't discuss a lot of that because I don't pry. So, but I know they have a president of the priesthood or a senior member of the quorum, one that's designated to be the leader, and then they have a number of apostles.
Okay.
Or I think they just prefer to call it a priesthood council.
Okay, but they're like apostles.
I guess, yeah.
All right.
I can't speak for them.
Yeah. Okay. So, is it true that Kody Brown, is he one of those?
Yeah, he came from that group, and I think he still considers himself a member.
Okay. So, and I know, I have to tell you, I feel like it's a little bit of a guilty pleasure that I love that show, but
that's
not
good.
on Netflix, so I haven't watched it for a while. But
well, it only goes, so many sessions, and then they take 9 months off or whatever and do the filming, and then it comes again the next season.
So I know he lived in Lehi, Utah for a time, and last I remember, and I haven't watched the show in years, they moved to Las Vegas. So I don't know if there's a big community in Las Vegas.
No.
I wouldn't think so. So in that case, is he just doing kind of a home church sort of thing?
Yeah, they have their own family meetings on Sunday.
Okay.
And I think if he comes up here to Salt Lake to visit or something, I'm not sure, but I think he attends some of the meetings. I'm not sure. He doesn't come up that often. But now that his children are going to school up here and college and getting married and so forth, then he has reasons to come back to Utah.
Okay.
To visit.
So, and I know his daughter, I want to say Madison, I can't remember, was going to Utah State, I believe, and she actually wanted to join the LDS Church.
And they wouldn't let her.
And they wouldn't let her. And she said, I don't want to be a polygamist. I don't want to do anything. But they still wouldn't let her because essentially the church policy is that they want to, you have to basically disown your parents, or I don't know if that's the right terminology.
Well, I think that varies. Without mentioning a name, there's a family whose son, I don't want to say anything that's going to get anybody in trouble. Let's just say that he joined the church, the LDS church, had friends that were LDS, went on a mission for the church. He didn't have to deny his parents, but he had to deny his intent to live it. And he now is back from his mission, performed an honorable mission. He was not prevented from joining the church, even though they knew what family he came from.
Okay, so
that's what I say. It's going to vary. That was her experience, and I think it might have been because that family was so public.
Right.
And if that got out, that maybe they thought, the leaders, that it wouldn't look very good to have a daughter of a plural family join a church. But it's done.
It is done. Okay. What do you think of that policy?
Well, it seems to me like somebody's being punished for somebody else's transgression. I believe there's an article of faith along those lines. I think it's too bad if she sincerely, and I think she did, sincerely wanted to join the church. I certainly think she should have had that privilege. Mm-hmm. And I call it a privilege because she looked at it that way.
So I know that a lot of people, and I'm sure there's as many opinions as there are fundamentalists, but
you're just about right.
So, and it seems like if I remember the show, right, they did talk a little bit about gay marriage in one of the episodes.
Well, one of the daughters is gay.
Well, this is before that.
Oh, okay.
The one episode that I remember was that they were talking about whether gay marriage should be legal. And as I recall, Kody was sitting around with his wives and they're like, yeah, consenting adults, they should be allowed to do whatever they want. It should be legal. I would suspect, and we'll talk about the FLDS church here in a minute, some of the other groups would find that policy or that heretical.
I cannot speak for a group as a whole, mm-hmm. But the fundamentalists that I know, I don't think have any problem with legal gay marriage. That's not a religious ceiling. That's a personal choice. And if we expect to have the country look at our marriages as at least decriminalize them, then we have to be willing to grant others their free agency in forming a family and in who they marry. This has been a big issue with us.
It has.
We have the ones that I associate with the most don't think there's anything wrong with a legal gay marriage because, like I say, it's not a religious thing, and they should have that legal right. We're talking about a civil rights level. They should have their civil rights just like we would like our civil rights. Now, we feel like we already have the consent of the Lord because this is His ordinance, this is His marriage style, and He's already indicated that that's an eternal principle. So religiously, we feel like we already have the right to live plural marriage, celestial plural marriage. But we don't have the civil right, which is, it's backwards to me. So I feel like that both gays and polygamists should have the civil right to have a marriage of their choosing.
Okay. So,
and what was ironic is that people used to tell us years ago, oh, if the gays get their legal rights to marriage, it's a slippery slope. Pretty soon the polygamists will. Well, you know how that turned around? In December of 2013, it was December 13th. I think of December in the Woodruff's decision, Waddup's he decriminalized plural marriage. We were excited. And a week after that, the Supreme Court gave the gays the legal right to have their marriage. So really, ours came first. However...
Now let's talk about that. So you're talking about this Waddup's case. This was here in Utah, or was that?
That was Utah. That was Utah, and it was appealed by the Attorney General, Sean Reyes. And it took a while for the appeal to go to Denver to the 10th Circuit Court, and then it took a while for them to decide, and then they upheld they overturned Waddup's decision. So it's right back to where it was. Okay. So it's now in the state of Utah. It's not only illegal. It's a felony, and it's one of the only states in the United States where it is a felony. And they might call it cohabitation or polygamy or whatever they call it. It's the same thing. So, yeah, if we are arrested and taken to court, we can be charged with a felony in Utah.
So I know Mark Shergleth, and he's not the Attorney General anymore, but he basically had the policy that, look, if you're not breaking any other laws, right, I'm going to look the other way.
Right.
Sean Reyes, I believe, is the new Attorney General. Does he have a similar policy or?
Yeah, I think basically. But he still couldn't let that go. I can't second guess Mark Shergleth. I question whether or not he would have appealed it. Because a lot of us knew him. He called us in for meetings and things so he could understand our culture better. Sean has not done that. So I think he just felt like, he's trying to save the reputation of the Attorney General's office. He couldn't allow that law to stand without an appeal, and then it was overturned.
Okay, so in federal court, it was basically...
it was a district court. District court in Denver. They upheld the appeal.
That's a federal court, though, right?
Well, it was a federal district court.
Federal district court. Okay. So has that been appealed to the Supreme Court or anything, or is that...
No. Well, now wait, I take that back. We did appeal, our people, did appeal it to the Supreme Court, but they refused to hear it because they didn't think there was enough evidence to make a change from the 10th Circuit Court. So, in other words, if they refuse to hear it, that means they uphold the district court's decision.
Right. So, essentially, the Utah law is now unchanged.
Right.
Okay.
Back to where it was. In 1935, it was made a felony. And that's a state law.
It's a state law. And so the state law has been upheld.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, really what was upheld was the bigamy statute, which has two prongs to it. It has the cohabitation prong and the purporting to be married. Well, we don't really go around purporting to be married, and we don't have a legal marriage license with more than one wife. So we don't really feel like we're purporting to be married. But that prong was upheld. The cohabitation was done away with by Waddup's because there are a lot of people that cohabit that aren't married. And so if you were going to really enforce that, you'd have a lot of trouble going around finding all the cohabiting people. So anyway, we felt like that virtually was, in essence, decriminalizing it.
So,
which it was. But then it leaves you, and this is really complicated. Okay, you still got the 1935 felony law on the books, and you've got the state constitution saying polygamy shall forever be prohibited. So how does this Waddup's decision go along with these two? See, it's confusing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's jump back to the issue. Now, I know the LDS Church, they, in November 2015, had a decision, or not a decision, they issued a thing in the handbook that said that we're not going to baptize children of gay parents anymore. And one of the things...
Until they're 18.
Until they're 18. One of the things that they've cited as, well, this is how we've always treated polygamists, so therefore how we treat children of gays is consistent. What do you think of that policy?
I was very disappointed in that decision, and for many reasons. I'll just give you one example. I worked at a bookstore. The day after that decision was made, somebody came into the bookstore and said, there's a young girl, 8 years old, in our ward. She is living in a home with gay parents, and they will not let, and she's scheduled to be baptized Saturday, and they will not let her be baptized. That breaks my heart. It does, because all her friends, in the primary class, they're all going to be baptized. How do you explain to her that she can't be baptized? I mean, that's just one of many situations that came up. I just felt bad about it.
Mm-hmm.
You're punishing the children for what I don't even think is a civil sin of the parents.
Yeah.
And the parents wanted her to be a member of the church. They wanted her to go to primary. They took her to church.
I think I remember reading about that in the paper. So
anyway, that's just one of many, but I was disappointed in the overall decision that they made.
Yeah. So, where do I want to go next? Let's kind of talk a little bit about the FLDS group. So, jumping back in history again. So we've got the or the Allred Group, the AUB. Did this other group, the Musser group, did that kind of morph into the FLDS church?
It was never called the Musser group.
Okay.
If anything, it was the Allred Group that evolved definitely from Joseph Musser. He's the one that called them to a council. And he knew it was going to be a separate council from the other one because he didn't go along with the ones they wanted to have put in. So at that time, there were 2 councils. They weren't called FLDS at first. They were just another priesthood council. Leroy Johnson lived till 98, I think. He kept taking, many wives. Many of them were young. And then when he died, then Rulon Jeffs was, I don't know whether he was actually next in line in seniority. I believe he was. But he was the next president of that council. And then, the story, Warren Jeffs, in the later years of Rulon, when his health was failing, Warren started more and more taking over. And then when Rulon died, then Warren took over. And things, in my opinion, just went from bad to worse. So they didn't become FLDS until after 1986.
1986 is when the FLDS church was...
Well, no, it was after. Because the reason I have 1986 is because that was really 2 years before it began. In 1984, Centennial Park, which is another group, did not go along with the one-man rule that was going on in the Rulon and Warren Jeffs faction. The Rulon Jeffs, because it was one-man rule. They had a priesthood council, but he was the main guy. Everything had to go through that one person. And the people that are now Centennial Park wanted a priesthood council.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand that. So in the AUB, there's a lot of people that have the sealing power. Are you saying that the FLDS, all those sealings had to go through one man?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
as far as I know, now I don't, and I'm not going to say a lot. There are some in the AUB, from what I understand, because I'm not a member of the group, that the leader can commission to perform plural marriages with priesthood authority and that calling. But I think it generally has to be approved of by the leader of the AUB, but he can appoint others to perform a plural marriage. You see what I mean?
Yeah. So whereas
in the other one, FLDS, which became that, I think he himself, I don't know for sure, I can't say definitively, but from what I understand, there was only one person, and that would be the leader of that priesthood council that could perform marriages. And he not only could perform them, he appointed who would marry who. And you were in trouble if you didn't marry who you were appointed to marry.
And these were essentially arranged marriages.
Yeah.
Like you would think of in...
Right. And in some cases, they had enough faith in the leader, Rulon or Warren or whoever, that they went ahead with it and made the best of it. And then there are others who, I'm not going to marry that guy, I don't like him, da-da-da-da, and so they would refuse. And they might get in trouble, or they might be asked to leave. So there was a lot more control as far as who married who down there than there ever was in the Allred Group. So Centennial Park, which they now have about 2,000 members, they separated from the other but they weren't even called FLDS until after Centennial Park separated. So that's why they don't like to say, oh, we separated from FLDS, because it wasn't even called FLDS at the time they separated. But technically, you get the picture.
Okay, so Centennial Park really was the one that came out, and FLDS separated from them?
Well, that's what Centennial Park might say, and then FLDS would say the other. It's whoever you're talking to. But in other words, they separated. And two of the members of the council, of the priesthood council in Colorado City, started the priesthood council that became Centennial Park. Many of them started a new community, another mile or two south, there in Arizona. And many of the Centennial Park people had homes in Colorado City, Hilldale, so they stayed there. And they're there to this day, but they are considered the Centennial Park group.
Okay. So I know the FLDS are pretty distinctive with their dress. A lot of them have long sleeve dresses and go all the way to the ankles. Are Centennial Park similar?
Similar, They dress modestly.
Okay.
I think you can basically tell the difference between FLDS, the ones that follow Warren. Now, there's apparently more that are not following Warren that are now because of all the problems. The ones that do, the women wear distinctive one color, solid color dresses of a certain style. Their hair is pretty much one main style, although there's some variations. So you can pretty much identify the followers of Warren Jeffs. But the ones that are broken away might still want to wear long sleeves or long dresses. And Centennial Park mostly the women will wear long sleeves, and some of them will wear pants. So they aren't just told they have to wear certain things, but they dress modestly.
Now, I remember there was a story, I'm trying to remember which book that was, read it several years ago, a funny story about a young man. They were living the law of consecration. I think this was in Great Basin Kingdom. I might have the book wrong. But at any rate, everybody had to wear the same clothes because they were living the law of consecration. And one young man took some of the leftover wool and had a different pair of pants made. And the law of consecration, they all said,
it's United Order, really.
United Order, right. Everybody had to wear the same clothes, so we were all the same. And then, so it was a really funny story, I remember, because
he backed up against the grist mill and wore out his pants so he didn't have to wear them anymore. I heard that story.
Yeah. So so the FLDS, they're the ones that all have the same dress, essentially?
Well, they vary in color. Some of them be lavender, some purple, some blue. Or
okay, and their hair, is that because they're trying to live this United Order law of consecration thing? Or?
I think Warren, number one, wants to exercise power and control over the people. Number two, he's trying to have everybody equal, look equal, and all that, except for him. He didn't do that. It didn't apply to him because he could dress however he wanted. So, yeah, it's hard to say, okay, this is the way these people dress and this is the way these people, because right now things are in such a state of flux and so confusing down there that, generally speaking, Warren Jeffs followers, the women wear, as we described, solid color dresses and pretty much the same pattern.
Okay. So going back to that, so it seems like the FLDS, especially and perhaps Centennial Park, very, very conservative in their views. Would you think, we were talking a little bit about the gay issue a little bit earlier, would you think that they would be as open as, say, you on the gay issue, or would they be against gay marriage?
I really can't answer for them, but I think there would at least be some that are okay with a legal gay marriage as a civil right. They have their civil right to form a family, just like we would like our civil rights to form our families.
Okay.
Leave religion out of it.
Okay. And then I've also heard regarding the FLDS, and let's throw the AUD and Centennial Park in there as well. We have the 1978 revelation of opening the priesthood to all male members of the church. Is it true that the FLDS basically don't recognize that revelation? They still believe a lot of the old curse of Cain, curse of Ham doctrines?
That's a tough question to answer for some other group.
Okay.
I can't answer for FLDS or Allreds, I think generally speaking, and this is really general, fundamentalist Mormons do not believe that the time has come for the black race to receive the priesthood. And maybe I better just let it go at that.
Okay.
Yeah, because I don't want to appear bigoted or racist or whatever. But there's too many scriptures and early leaders' quotes, and one of the books we wrote was on blacks in the priesthood, so I'm familiar with all the background and all that. So I just question the timing on it.
Okay. So are you aware of any group, any polygamist group? Because we've talked about three. I mean, I know there's a lot more than three out there. But are you aware of any groups that do have black polygamists or allow black members in their groups?
I don't.
You don't? Okay. So it would seem that those curse of Cain, curse of Ham are still well entrenched in most. Is that a fair statement?
I guess. It's so controversial, and it's so hard to explain it so other people understand it.
Okay.
So I think, I don't see anything wrong with blacks joining the church and having total equal civil rights. It's a civil rights issue.
It's a civil rights issue, not a... Okay, I won't list that anymore. Okay, let's talk about some of the other groups out there. Actually, before we do that, before we started recording...
Aren't we recording?
No, we're still recording. But before we recorded, you and I had a conversation. And about the FLDS group in particular. And one of the things that you had mentioned was they were pretty large, and now their numbers have dropped precipitously. So can you tell me what you think about the high water mark was for their membership and where it is now?
Well, yeah, I think it was about 10,000 in their day before all these breakoffs and factions and, Warren Jeffs took over. From what I understand, in talking to people and even the media that were very familiar with what was going on down there as much as they could be, I think the high mark was about 10,000. And then when Warren took over and began kicking people out, there was one Sunday when he listed 21 men's names and said, "You're out of here, pack your bags and go." And he split up families. I've heard so many stories that I just wouldn't want to be in that man's shoes because he has caused so much heartache, and that's putting it mildly, with the families down there, that people, a lot of them have reached their limit as to how far they'll follow him, and they've just left. What's sad now is that Warren himself is telling a lot of the people to leave rather than pay their $100 assessment on the property they're in. And he says, and you're on your own, from what I understand. So they're moving out with very little training on a job, very little money to work with, practically with just the clothing on their back, and they're going to surrounding communities there and starting all over. So there's just story after story about what's happening to the people that no longer want to follow Warren. They're really in a lot of trouble, a lot of hurt. And there are organizations that are helping and willing to help. those people. Holding Out Help is one of them. They've helped countless, over 1,500 people that have made up their minds to leave but didn't know what to do once they left. And so they've been helping them find housing and jobs and education and all that. They're an amazing organization. Hope Organization, I don't know how much they're still involved. They're headquartered out of St. George. Safety Net was also trying to be of help. And there's other organizations, too, that are willing to help the people that need help down there. So I have no idea what the population is of the followers of Warren Jeffs, or even those that live in the town. I guess you could find out what the population is in town by talking to the mayors of Colorado City and then the mayor of Hilldale. But it's just really in a sad state of affairs.
Okay, so just ballpark, you think it's probably half of what it used to be?
I couldn't even begin to tell you. I did read an article in the paper that said they interviewed one of the former members of Warren Jeffs' group, and she said that she felt there were more ex-FLDS than there were followers of Warren Jeffs or FLDS.
Have they joined with other groups like Centennial Park?
No. Oh, no, they will not join Centennial Park unless it's a very rare occasion. Centennial Park has been there to help their teenagers. They've offered their homes, opened them up if they needed a place to stay. But to followers of Warren, that's the enemy, because they broke away from, in their idea, from their priesthood. So they don't have priesthood. They are apostates, So they consider Centennial Park the enemy, whereas Centennial Park has opened up their homes if they would take advantage of it. Mm-hmm. So, it's... Okay, so you talk about other groups. There's a Davis County Co-op or Kingston group. They have about 2,000 members as well. Their leader is Paul Kingston, and he's in the South Salt Lake area. And they have, I don't know if you call it, I guess, a priesthood council, but they are into it more. They started in 1935 as a United Order organization, not necessarily a polygamist organization or fundamentalist or anything like that. It was during the Depression, shortly after 1935. And so they wanted to find ways of supporting their families on an economic level. So a lot of them are polygamists, but the United Order was the thing that got them going. So I know several of the people in that community. The women are amazing. They have large families, and they work. A lot of the women are mothers and have full-time jobs. And so anyway, that's another organization. There's some smaller groups. There was one in Manti that's pretty much down to very few families, the Jim Harmston group. There's the branch. There's Gerald Peterson, and when he died, his son Jerry Peterson kind of took over. I think he's still the leader of that.
And it's called the branch.
Well, there's another name for it, too. I can't remember right offhand what it is. So there are certain breakoffs. It's much smaller. Nelson Naylor Group, that's that's a breakoff from Centennial Park. So, they have about 300. They have a priesthood council.
300, it's a very small group.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, some of the others are even smaller than that, so.
Wow. So would it be safe to say that the AUB is probably the biggest?
It is.
Group now? It's about 700.
It's the biggest one that's in unity or in one name or whatever. They've had their issues too, and some of them will maybe go, but don't. They kind of question whether the leadership has I don't know. There's some problems, but in the LDS Church, there's problems. We have to admit. So it's it's a tough time right now, but don't forget the independents.
Yes.
That's what I am.
Okay. So
I consider myself an independent fundamentalist Mormon, and that's because I do not belong to any of the organized groups. And there's about 15,000, 12,
they're the
15,000.
biggest.
Well, but they aren't a group.
Yes. Yeah.
So there are a lot that believe in keeping these eternal principles alive, not just plural marriage, but others as well, as best as they can amongst the families. And they just don't feel impressed, and I don't, to actually join or be baptized into any of the groups.
Okay. So independent. So that would just be, so unaffiliated is kind of
Yeah,
big
kind of.
group. So you would have an unaffiliated, would that be, I guess, LDS members secretly practicing polygamy?
Or it could be fundamentalists that believe in those early doctrines, don't necessarily live plural marriage, but they want to raise their kids in the LDS church. I know families like that. And so they keep quiet. They go to church, and they are very quiet about what they say. They go along with the program, and maybe sometime they'll reach a point in their lives where they feel like, I can't support that anymore, so they'll just become inactive.
Okay. And as well as maybe FLDS who've left, or AUB who've left, or Centennial Park has left.
Well, I don't know if FLDS has joined the LDS Church, any of them, but the AUB, some of them have joined the LDS Church.
What I'm saying is there are probably breakoffs from each of these groups that would be independent. That's what I meant to say.
Oh, I guess so. That's going to vary, because some of them may not believe in fundamentalism at all anymore.
Okay.
There are some teenagers that were so controlled as they were younger that when they left, they became pretty wild into drinking and women and things like that they could not have anything to do with there. When they got out into society, that was a big temptation for them. And so there are some of those that don't want a thing to do with religion. So you wouldn't call them independent fundamentalists.
No. They would just be gone.
They'd gone their own direction. And so that's why I say it's really confusing when you try and designate, okay, this group and this group. It's pretty hard to make these definitive definitions and draw certain lines, and it's kind of hazy.
I did want to ask you a question about another group that I've heard of, Ervil LeBaron. So can you talk about his group? That's kind of an interesting group.
Well, I don't know where to start. He came from a family that claimed to get their priesthood through Benjamin F. Johnson. And according to the story, Benjamin F. Johnson was adopted son of Joseph Smith. And so he passed the priesthood on down through that line. And it was a large family. Ervil LeBaron was one of the older sons, and they felt like theirs was the only true lineage of priesthood. And I don't know how to go. It's pretty much what was in the news. He's responsible for killing or the death of about 20 people, and I know that because I knew some of them. Ogden was introduced to him one time under a fictitious name, and so we went out to a meeting and thought this was this guy's name, Stilson, and lo and behold, shortly after that, we saw a picture wanted, Ervil LeBaron, but the picture of this guy that we had met. And he even came and stayed in my home under that other name. And then when I found out who he was, I was a little concerned. But fortunately, I didn't know who he was at the time he stayed in my home. It was just kind of a whole different aspect of fundamentalism. I never really have considered his role as a fundamentalist Mormon. Maybe generally speaking, you could say that, but there's a colony now, Colonial LeBaron, that has a lot of the people in the LeBaron family, but his role was more militant. You either follow me or else. And Ogden got a letter to that effect, and we were a little concerned about whether or not it was the or else. And I could go into an interesting story on that, but I think I'll pass. So anyway...
So let's back up a little bit. So where did he claim to get his priesthood authority from?
From Allred LeBaron was his dad.
Okay.
He got it from Benjamin Johnson. Benjamin Johnson was the adopted son of Joseph Smith.
So from Nauvoo.
Yeah.
Okay. So, because I mean, that's like 1840, and this is...
Oh, that didn't come down through the 1886 thing at all.
Yeah. So
That came down
I'm just
through...
wondering, because Ervil LeBaron was a polygamist. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we talked a little bit about 1933 seemed to be a pivotal year. The Third Manifesto, you had the Allred Group, or the AUB group. You had another group that kind of morphed into the Centennial Park and the FLDS. Does Ervil LeBaron...
No, they came down through a different line totally.
So he was more of an independent...
Oh, I don't want to call him an independent. I don't want to claim him.
So he just...
No, he was responsible for Reuel Allred's death. He sent two of his wives, is what I understand.
So why did he...
Because he was a very jealous, power-hungry guy, and he was the only one that had the priesthood authority. And if you didn't follow him, there was a letter to 4 people, and Ogden's name is on that, and so was Reuel's, and Reuel came up dead, and so we were very concerned for a while. But, then you had, I haven't thought about this part of it for a long time. Verlin, and who was the one that he had killed, his brother. And then there was the one that wrote the book. What was that?
No, some like us.
And I have nobody else in the house. Anyway, you'll have to do some editing on this. So, anyway, Berlin. So you got Ervil, and I can't remember the one that he had killed. And Berlin was the one that started to write the book on the LeBaron family, and then he died in a car accident. And Charlotte, one of his wives, had to finish that one. It's on the LeBaron story.
So LeBaron sent a bunch of wives to become essentially assassins to kill people.
I don't know if it was always wives. It wasn't always wives.
But some of them.
But he just sent people to kill other people.
Because he just basically wanted to consolidate power in the polygamous Mormon community.
And that's why there was, he just was the one that, he was the one mighty and strong. He was the one that was supposed to take over everything. And so he
so he was his own.
So many stories connected to this.
Because there is a LeBaron group now. Is that true?
Yeah, I guess you'd call it a LeBaron group, but they're descendants. And they're not all descendants of Ervil. Some of them are descendants of Berlin, and why can't I think of the brother's name that he killed? For some reason, it escapes me. But anyway, there was a lot of jealousy among the brothers, Baron brothers.
Okay. So,
and he was finally arrested, and died in jail, in prison.
Okay, so this is probably in the 70s where he's killing Reuel Allred and some of these others. Is that
right? Reuel died in 79.
79. Okay.
Was it 79? I think it was 79.
And I don't know. It seems like he was even trying to go after President Kimball. Have you heard that, or am I making that?
Oh, he had a lot of people on his hit list.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the church authorities were very concerned. They doubled security at one time because he had made threats.
Against lots of people.
I can't remember who it was, whoever was president of the church at the time.
But he's responsible for about 20 deaths.
That I know of.
Maybe more. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting.
Yeah, the person in whose home we were in, that we met him by his other name, that guy came up missing in the next week.
Oh, you're kidding.
And we know very well what happened to him.
Wow. So was his body ever found, or?
I can't remember.
Can't remember.
But I do remember that it was definitely pinned on him.
So I don't know how much you want to get into. Could I ask you about your life with Ogden?
Sure.
Okay, so Because so your husband was Ogden Kraut. Now, are you from the Salt Lake area? Was that up in Weber County that you were?
Oh, I never was in Weber County.
Okay. Is this the Ogden screwed me up?
Oh, Ogden, yeah. His name is that, but he wasn't from Ogden.
Okay.
Well, just quickly, I was born and raised in the LDS Church. I'm very happy in it. Went to BYU on a scholarship, graduated with honors. A year after I graduated, I married in monogamy to Ted Wilde. Was married in the temple. Was married for 9 years, but during that 9 years, I realized there had been a lot of changes made in the church, and the two of us, he was very intelligent, a researcher, scholar, not an author, but knew a lot about the history of the church. So I learned a lot of that from him and in visiting with a lot of friends that we had. One of those friends was Ogden Kraut, and so when the marriage didn't work out a year later, I became Ogden's second wife. Was married to him for 33 years. And then he died in 2002, 15 years ago. We had a really happy marriage, got along very well. He wrote, and I helped him write 65 books on church history and doctrine. It was that during that time that we met a lot of fundamentalists and members of the different groups and so forth because of his books.
Now, was Ogden a member of the LDS Church too?
He was excommunicated in 72.
72, okay.
I married him in 69.
Okay, so you were both members of the LDS Church when you got married.
Yeah.
And that was just, I think, most LDS people think that, sealings always happen in the temple. I'm assuming that's probably not what happened.
No, no, it's not the place, it's the person. Okay. Who has the authority as to whether or not. A lot of the marriages in the early days of the church were before there was a temple. They even have accounts of, who was it that met him at the Farmington train station? And he married him on a train going one way, and on the way back they got off. It was a couple that had met him, John W. Taylor, I think it was, that married him on a train. Another one was married on a buggy ride going around Liberty Park because this is at a time when things were kind of quiet and careful. So, yeah, I mean, there was an endowment house, that people were married in out here in the valley. They were married down in Mexico. There was no temple down there. So it's not the place. It's the authority that seals that marriage. And if the person that is sealing the marriage has had it properly conferred upon him, and preferably has had a calling or a commission to do that, but that's not essential. But it's nice if they have had that calling. That's what seals the marriage.
Okay. So would it be similar to a typical LDS sealing ceremony, or is it pretty different?
No, it's pretty much the same.
Okay.
There's certain wording that has to be used.
Right. And I would understand that, and I don't want to delve into that too much. But so you were both members of the LDS Church. I guess you've always been an independent.
Right. We never joined a group.
You've never joined a group. Okay. So this was just somebody else that you knew that you felt had the proper authority that sealed you together. And then, talk about how that was, because I would assume that you had to be pretty secretive about that.
Very. My own parents and family didn't know for quite a while.
Wow. And so...
Not the way I'd like to have had it, but it was essential.
Okay. So, you said you had a wonderful marriage for 33 years. I would expect you probably didn't live in the same house.
Oh, sure. But he was not there 24/7. He was in and out. I was a secretary, so we got away with going places together because I typed his books.
Okay.
So, we were good friends, and so, if anyone asked, well, yeah, this is my secretary, which was true.
Mm-hmm.
When Jesus Was Married came out in 69, it was in February of 69, that was Ogden's first book, and he knew that Joseph S. Smith, who was president of the Quorum of the 12 at that time, he believed that Jesus was married. So as soon as the books came out of the binder, we took the first copy up to Joseph Fielding Smith and got right in. The secretary was there at that time. You could walk right in practically and see the general authorities. His office door was open. Here was a receptionist. Did we give him this book? He motioned us in. They gave it to him, and we said, well, what do you think? And he said, oh, absolutely he was married. His account of his marriage is right in the New Testament. It could be no other way. The account of his marriage is in the New Testament, referring to the marriage of Cana. And so with that endorsement, we took the book around to some of the bookstores and sold the first 500 in a very short period of time, and that's been the most popular book. We've printed several thousand.
Jesus was married. So you're saying that the wedding feast where Jesus turned water to wine, that was
his marriage.
Who did he marry?
Probably Mary.
Mary Magdalene?
He had at least 3 wives.
3 wives.
Mary, Martha, and Mary Magdalene that we know of. And there's a quote that king's daughters were among his honorable wives. I mean, we wrote a whole book on that.
King's daughters were among his honorable
among Christ's honorable wives.
So what? I don't understand what that means. King's daughters?
Were among his, he married king's daughters. King's daughters were among his honorable wives, meaning the Savior's wives.
Okay, so are you referring to Mary and Martha being the king's daughters?
Not necessarily, but Mary Magdalene was from royalty.
Mary Magdalene was from royalty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not the translation on that is, like we discussed earlier, wrong.
Okay. So do you get that from, like, I don't see that in a Joseph Smith translation, or is that from Revelation? How do you come up with that?
Well, you'd have to read the book. There's a lot of references. Joseph Smith, for example, told 2 or 3 people, you are direct descendants of Jesus Christ. Well, can't be that unless he had children, which he did. So Christ always said, come follow me. Well, he didn't say, come follow me, but don't get married. I mean, you're just one thing after another, you just kind of put it all together. And marriage being as important as it is, can you imagine the Son of God not being married?
So, I don't know, does the LDS Church have a position on whether Jesus was...
Oh, they don't like you talking about it. That's another story. When we got this book out, we went down to Provo, and E.L. Whitehead was in charge of the 70s bookstore in Provo. This is in 1969. And we took in 10 copies. And we said, well, we thought maybe you'd like to put this out, in case somebody is interested in that subject. Oh, gee, I don't know, Well, I'll put it in the back, and if anybody asks for it, then I'll... Well, in 2 days, he had sold them all, and he called and said, can you bring me down 20? And come to find out, he decided to put it right by the check stand, right, the cash register. As everybody left, they'd see that book. Well, about this time, the religion professors up at BYU, Rodney Turner, Hiram Andrus, some of those, were being told not to talk about Jesus being married. The church didn't have a position on it. They were not to talk about it at all in their religion classes. So we knew Hiram Andrus and Rodney Turner, and so they just said, well, we can't say anything about it, but there's a book down at 70's bookstore. You could go down and get that, because they believed he was married. But they had to obey, the church headquarters. So that book sold really well down there because the students would go down there and then word got around, So anyway, that was just kind of an interesting story. The timing on that was kind of interesting.
Okay. So that's interesting. I've not heard that. So Mary, Martha, Mary Magdalene. So he had 2 Mary wives.
Yeah, he did.
Are there any others that...
Well, I can't give you names, but there were, he had a trail of women.
How many would you say that?
Oh, I'm not going to guess. I don't know.
Okay.
But at least 3.
At least 3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I might check out that book. So that was published in 1969 when you were both members of the LDS.
Oh, yeah. And then what I was going to say is that came out in February, and we were sealed in September of that year.
Oh, okay. So that was the year you were married.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, cool. So, so Ogden's written a lot of books. What are some of the other important books, I guess, with regards to polygamy, especially? And also, did he write any other books that were not polygamy related?
Oh, most of them.
Oh, most of them?
Yeah, Gift of Tongues, Gift of Dreams, Seer Stones, Calling and Election, 6 books on priesthood, 3 books on the kingdom of God, right from the beginning, tracing the kingdom of God as being separate from the church. Joseph Smith said they were definitely 2 separate organizations. Kingdom of God's political, church is ecclesiastical. Today, we have quotes that the church thinks they're the same thing. Kingdom of God and the church are the same thing, which is not the way we understood it. So she calling an election, a book on the 70s and how that transpired and kind of decreased, the importance of the 70s. 95 Thesis, Principles of Personalities, Compromise and Concession, a lot of them. And some of them mention plural marriage, but there are only one or two. Oh, New Testament, or polygamy in the Bible. Polygamy in the Bible was a big one. Old Testament took up a lot of it, but there's also ways of understanding that it was lived at the time of the New Testament as well. You couldn't be a rabbi without being married. Jesus was a rabbi. I mean, there's just evidences like that. And then quotes from Celsus and, early historians that were contemporaries of Christ.
Okay. So, I think the rest of the Christian world would find that quite heretical.
All right. Yeah, that's okay.
Have you had any experiences with talking to, say, evangelicals or Catholics or anybody like that?
Not personal, really.
No, so, okay. That would be very interesting.
No, it makes sense to me.
All right. So another question I wanted to ask you, let's talk a little bit about D&C 132 and the revelation on marriage. So I know, in fact, this came up in a conversation this past week. There are some women in the LDS Church specifically. There's a few verses in there basically that refer to Emma Smith that says that, if you don't consent to this polygamy, you're going to be destroyed. It seems like Brian and Laura Hales said that, the D&C 132 didn't go through the same editing process that a lot of the other revelations did. Joseph was killed soon after. But what are your feelings about those references to Emma specifically, that she would be destroyed if she didn't consent to polygamy?
Well, you'd have to understand what was being meant by destroyed. Does that mean her exaltation? Or does it mean something else, It's important, I think, because about in that area, it talks about the law of Sarah as well.
Mm-hmm. A lot of women have problems with that, too.
Yeah, okay. Well, ideally, the law of Sarah is that the first wife gives consent for any subsequent wives. If she does not give her consent, then it says that the man is exempt from that law, which is the case with Joseph Smith. Emma didn't give her consent except for a couple of incidences, so he was exempt from that law. He could go ahead and take wives without her consent, according to Section 132. And I believe that's the case.
So why have a law if you're exempt from it? Is that really a law?
Well, it's an ideal law if things were, but the thing is, if that were the case, then the woman would have control over the family. Who came in it, who she married. This is a priesthood law. This is not a matriarchal law. So the man...
Sorry, I didn't know mine was on. Turn it off. Okay.
The man is obligated, I believe, in Ogden to try and be as patient as you can with the first wife and explain it to her, have a period of time where you're working with her if she's opposing it. And then if it comes to a point where you can see that she's never going to accept that, does that mean his exaltation is jeopardized because the first wife won't let him live a celestial law? That doesn't make sense. It's a priesthood law, not a woman's law. But he's supposed to work with her and try and bring her along. But if she doesn't accept it, then he's exempt from that law, which means he can go ahead and take a plural wife. Of course, I believe you can't get to the highest degree of the celestial kingdom unless you live celestial plural marriage. I wrote a book on that. So his whole exaltation would have been stopped had he not been able to take another wife and live plural marriage. You see what I mean? And I know this is probably not your belief, but I very strongly believe that that's the case.
I understand that. So, I mean, a woman, most LDS women, I'm going to try my best to channel my LDS woman here, but they're going to say, well, look, so you're telling me, to me, there is no the law of Sarah. If a man can be exempt from the law of Sarah, what's the point of having a quote law of Sarah? Oh, it's more of an idea. It's an ideal.
No, it's an ordinance. In fact, and during the marriage ceremony, she's supposed to put the hand of the future wife, the prospective wife, into the hand of her husband. That's part of the ceremony. But if she doesn't go along with it and is not going to be there, he's exempt from that. Otherwise, it just makes sense to me.
All right. So, because, there's the scripture, neither is the man without the woman, nor the woman without the man in the Lord. So if they're not in this together, you said, why should the woman stop the man from exaltation, but why should the man stop the woman?
No, she has the opportunity. The door's open for her to accept it. He's not going to force her. But
he is forcing her if he's taking another wife against her will, right?
But he's not forcing her to take part in the ceremony. He's not forcing her to give that wife to him, but he still is able in the law of the priesthood to take another wife. It's just really important. But, I can see why Joseph and other people would have to be exempt from that law if the first wife is absolutely not going to go along with it. She's jeopardizing her own exaltation because she won't get the blessings for living it if she's opposed to it. She might have another wife in the family, but if she's adamantly opposed to it and did not give that wife to her husband, she won't get the blessings for it.
Okay. Well, I know there's a lot of LDS women. In fact, I know one who said, I don't want any part of that.
That's fine. They don't have to have any part of it.
So, yeah. So
that's why it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
I look at it that it's a great blessing. I thank the Lord all the time that I was able to live for marriage because I have a strong testimony that that's the eternal marriage covenant.
Okay. Well, trying to remember if there's anything else. Is there any other things that you want to bring up as far as polygamy for our listeners out there?
Well, one thing you kept mentioning FLDS.
Mm-hmm.
The trouble with that is that people on the outside, maybe even people in the LDS Church, but usually people that don't know much about the LDS Church, have a tendency to get that mixed up with the mainstream LDS Church, FLDS. It's Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Well, people that don't understand the whole workings of this think, oh, that's the LDS Church. That's a mainstream church. Look, they're still living polygamy, and look what's happening. Oh, it's a terrible... So it's too bad that they named their church that. Not only does the mainstream LDS Church have it confused, but us fundamentalists are confused too. Because we have fundamentalist Mormon as our umbrella term, and so they think all fundamentalists are like the Warren Jeffs group. So it's very confusing. So when I do presentations or talk at all, I try and make the distinction that FLDS is totally different. It's one of the groups out of about 38,000 in the height of a population study I did. It's only about a quarter of the number of fundamentalist Mormons is the FLDS. Now it's probably less. And so it's important for people to realize the distinctions. The fundamentalist Mormons are not all like Warren Jeffs. We do not have his leader, the independents especially, but the other groups have their own leaders. They don't do things like Warren Jeffs has done to his people. And the LDS Church certainly wants to make that distinction. And I'm more than glad to help them do that because it's they're not alike at all.
Okay. Well, great.
So I can't, this has been my life. I have my personal testimony. I had several spiritual experiences that led me to where I am today. I know that Ogden was a man I wish to marry and be sealed to. I couldn't question that for a minute. We both had spiritual answers to that. And I just feel very lucky to have had such a wonderful man. We just got along great. We had an ideal marriage. And we weren't together 24/7, but that's not a problem with us. We worked together a lot on the books, and we went around visiting people, and we spent quite a bit of time together, but he also spent time with his other wives. And I just feel very lucky for being one of his wives and for meeting so many wonderful people that I wouldn't have otherwise met because of my relationship with him.
Well, cool. How many wives did he have?
You never answer that question
Never answer that
publicly. No, a few. I always say a few, and there's reasons for that. Some of the women that he had sealed to him, their extended family did not know, and so in order to protect them.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting when the Olympics came to Salt Lake. We had just become public. 3 of us girls wrote a book called Voices in Harmony, Contemporary Women Celebrate Plural Marriage, and it came out in December of 2000. Well, that was our coming out. I was always very quiet about it. Ogden was interviewed by media quite often. He was kind of the authority on things going on in the polygamy world. And I just sit off to the side. Don't talk to me and don't show my face because people don't know, a lot of them, that I'm in this principle. And then for various reasons, there were 3 of us, Mary Batchelor, Mary Ann Watson, and I, that thought, somebody has got to come out with a better representation of how this principle can be lived and not let the women that are leaving and have a bitter story to tell be the voice of polygamy. They have a right to tell their stories. We never doubted that for a minute. But there were 3 or 4, and they were coming out, a few more, writing books about what a terrible lifestyle polygamy was. So the 3 of us got together and really felt impressed that we were the ones to write a book with a more positive outlook on it. So we did, and we sent out invitations for plural wives to participate anonymously. We got 100 responses, and it was amazing, the stories that they told. We said, keep it short, 1 or 2 pages at the most. Give us an expression of your testimony or an experience that you had that shows that this principle can work for you. Not everybody, but it works. So anyway, when our book came out, it was the first thing of any real positive nature of personal experiences on contemporary polygamy that had been put out. It wasn't too long we got a phone call from the Attorney General's office, and Mark Shurtleff wanted to talk to us. He'd never talked to women that were living plural marriage that liked it. So we went up to his office and had an 1.5-hour long visit with him, and he asked all kinds of questions, and he said, I'd like to meet with you regularly. But anyway, we kind of opened his eyes to how it could be lived. It wasn't all bad. We have testimonies that it was a true principle, but not for everybody, but it worked for us. So anyway, long story short, we had several meetings with Mark. We were invited to be on the Safety Net Committee, represent the polygamist community, and work with service providers that were involved. And I feel like we helped out a little bit in helping people understand that this lifestyle could work. So in 2002, along come the Olympics. And, all this polygamy stuff, the church, the LDS Church in Utah, to a lot of people, is synonymous with polygamy. So we made up a couple of 100 press packets and had information in there about I don't know, I can't even remember all the things, but more about how it could work for some people and the positive aspects of it and the charts and percentages and all that. There were very few people that were actually living it, and we weren't connected to the mainstream LDS Church and da-da-da-da. Well, when the media came from all over the world and went down to the press headquarters, and here were these packets, and then they talked to the local media, who by now we knew very well because 2 years had passed since our book came out. And they said, well, where are the polygamists and where are the venues? So we had given permission that they could give me as a contact name. Got all these phone calls, and so we set up appointments, and we had, I don't know how many media people come to my house, and it was really funny to see them come in, very skittish, very nervous. How do you interview plural wives? It was really interesting. So after the first one, because they began asking questions. Well, how do you do the bedroom? And we aren't going to answer questions like that. So we tactfully got out of that. The three of us got together that we got to set some perimeters here before the next interview. So we decided we're not going to ask or answer any questions about what goes on in the bedroom, names of other wives or members of the family, because we don't want to run a risk of them getting in problem. And the other one was our relationship to the church, because I was still a member of the church. So the next interview came along, and we said, well, we're more than glad to talk to you. There are 3 areas we would rather not answer questions, and we named those 3. But we would be glad to talk to you about our testimonies, our day-to-day activities, our religious beliefs. We gave them plenty of areas that they could ask questions in. Well, you could almost see, just so relieved, because they didn't even know what kind of questions to ask. Well, many of them gave us hugs as they left, because we had such a good visit, and we explained why we lived it, and they could see, okay, it's an Old Testament. There at least 30 men lived through a marriage in the Old Testament, and Jesus Christ never condemned it. In fact, we didn't really go into too much about him having wives, because I thought that was a little bit, maybe much. So we focused more on the contemporary aspect of it. So anyway, I don't know how many dozens of interviews from reporters all over the world. And it was really an education for them and for us, I think, because it was interesting to see what questions they had that we could feel comfortable in answering. So anyway, that was part of our mission, I guess. And I've had, I don't know how many hundreds of interviews.
So, yeah, I do remember hearing about a new organization. It's called Principal Voices. Is that right? And that was kind of in a polygamy.
It started with this book.
Okay.
And because people were calling, we had to have a name. What do we call ourselves? And we're just the 3 of us. And then another girl kind of joined in. So there were 4 of us for a while. We weren't out soliciting members or anything like that. It's just that since we were the contact people, we had to have a name that we could be referred to as
in the principle of polygamy.
It's a pun.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I did remember just one more question that I wanted to ask you concerning D&C 132. One of the references in there says something about wives and concubines. So my understanding of the Old Testament, I want to key in on that term concubines there. We look at it today, concubines are known more of as, especially with ISIS in the Middle East, those are basically sex slaves. They would take women who are conquered in war, try to convert them to Islam, and they're not full wives, and it seems awful.
Right. Oh yeah, I agree.
It just seems like these are literally sex slaves, and so I have a concern about that in 132. It says in there that God gave Abraham and David wives and concubines. It's my understanding of the Old Testament, especially, a lot of these wives that David and Solomon had were arranged marriages with other kingdoms. They were there to build alliances. These were not Jewish women. When we talk about the sealing, I can't imagine how, if Abraham's marrying a Gentile, and many of these wives certainly would have been Gentiles, why, in my modern understanding, if you want to be sealed together forever, you've got to be members of the church, or at least worthy members of the priesthood. And I wouldn't expect Ogden Kraut to go marry, some
unbeliever.
Unbeliever. That's a better word for it. So an unbeliever. So why would God sanction concubines specifically? Is that the same thing as a sex slave as we're thinking of now? I'll just stop there.
Well, my understanding of that is that they are lesser wives. They are not covenant wives. They probably are not eternal type wives. But I think, there are traditions and customs in countries that God allows to happen. They may not be his religious way of doing things, but he allows people to adhere to the customs and traditions of the country or the time, okay? I would assume it was something like that. That, Abraham was building up a kingdom kind of like, and whatever the reason, God acknowledged that. Not as a religious thing necessarily. We talked about the difference between civil rights and religious rights. They were civil ceremonies, probably. I really don't know how to explain that any better.
These concubines would have been for time only, essentially?
Yeah, but who knows if some of the others are going to be only for time, too. I mean, you have to be worthy.
Right.
You can't just be collecting wives and think, oh, boy, I got it made.
Well, it just seems strange to me because it does seem like, especially with David, in the Doctrine and Covenants 132, it says that he did not sin in anything except in the case of
Uriah.
But, I'm sitting here from a modern LDS perspective and saying, well, look, David probably married somebody from some other kingdom or some other tribe that was not Jewish, had nothing to do with that. So, I guess it kind of makes sense in the idea that, okay, if you're considering this a time-only sealing and this is and God...
Well, and at that time, were there really marriage ceremonies? There weren't. You slept with somebody, she was your wife. There weren't marriage ceremonies.
Okay. Well, what about Uriah? I mean, was there...
Oh, well, it was his wife because he had apparently slept with her. I mean, they don't go to a priest or somebody to be married. The idea of understanding of marriage in those days, that's why Judah, in the case of Judah, and all that mess, go in and sleep with somebody, then that meant you were his wife.
So it was as simple as that?
The way I understand it, because you won't read in the New Testament, the marriage ceremony at Cana, so maybe by that time, maybe they had something. But in the Old Testament, I don't believe they had marriage ceremonies.
Yeah, I mean...
At least it wasn't the usual thing. They might have had like a king married a dignitary, some big celebration with royalty. But just an average Joe Schmo...
Well, a lot of those were arranged marriages. Someone's going to marry you, and so you're together. I'm not an Old Testament expert, but so that's interesting. They would just... you're getting married. I would think they would have had some sort of a ceremony.
Well, you'd think because we're so accustomed to that.
Maybe.
But
have to get an Old Testament.
I just think pretty much, you could talk to an Old Testament. I might be wrong in some cases, but I think generally speaking, they were married. If they slept together, they were married.
Okay. So as far as the concubines in today's world, does that really apply to our life?
Well, I think it means something different now. Concubine, yeah.
So one thing that I
think it's it's a mistress. To me, today, a concubine would be equivalent of a mistress. Isn't that the way you see it?
Well, I guess, in the case of the Middle East, you could call them the mistresses. But to me...
Well, I think then there might have been more of they were part of his harem. The concubines came and lived in his palace or in his estate or something. Today, usually they don't live with a legal wife. They're off someplace else. So,
well, another question is, so with Brian Hales, I interviewed him, and I should have asked him this question. I might have to schedule another interview with him. But Brian talked, there are, I think he said 11 to 14 women who were sealed who were married to other men who were sealed to Joseph. I think most Latter-day Saints would find that a little bit shocking. But so I was wondering if Brian said he believes that these are women that Joseph did not have sexual relations with.
I agree. That's my understanding, but I have no way of proving it.
And so I'm wondering, would they be considered concubines or lesser wives? Because
I don't think so, because I think priesthood married them.
Okay. So they would be a full wife, not a lesser.
They would be I think each case would have to be considered on its own merits. There were some whose husbands were not worthy priesthood holders. There were some that they were. They were good priesthood holders. I think that maybe Joseph was giving them the option to choose. And on the other side, they could choose which one they wanted to be with for eternity. I think he just provided. My personal opinion is that Joseph Smith made covenants in their preexistence with certain wives, and he said, I will give you that option, that opportunity to live plural marriage. You can accept or reject it. He never forced anybody to join his family. But maybe they got married before he had a chance to offer him that, before he even knew about plural marriage. But he still kept his commitment to them. So he still said, I'll offer to give you that opportunity to live plural marriage. You can accept or reject it, or you can do it and then choose. That's my personal opinion.
Sure.
It makes sense to me. And really, to me, the gospel is all about a lot of doctrines and ordinance and things, but they have to make sense. I don't like to be a part of some ordinance that I can't understand. So I try and figure it out. Well, does this make sense? Just common sense. And then I pray about it and hopefully get a religious confirmation one way or the other.
Okay. All right. Well, I think I'm out of questions, so.
I'm about out of comments.
All right. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you talking with me here on Gospel Tangents.
Okay.
And we'll let you go.
Glad to do it. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll see you. If you'd like to hear the entire conversation without any interruptions, sign up at patreon.com/gospeltangents and you can hear the entire video or audio uncut, whichever you'd like. So this is part of the Gospel Tangents podcast network, and so please sign up today and support Gospel Tangents.